President Trump's long-promised retribution campaign has reached new heights, becoming even more deeply personal. Then again, he's long hinted that it was coming.
I would have wiped the floor with the guys that weren't loyal, which I will now do, which is great. You know, I love getting even with people, but I will. I will have wiped.
You love getting even.
Oh, absolutely.
I am your warrior. I am your justice. And for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. I am your retribution. I say it and it sounds beautiful, right? You know, my revenge will be success. And I mean that. Indict me. I consider it a great badge of honor because I'm being indicted for you.
A new article in The New Yorker says getting even has been a lifelong preoccupation, and Trump seems to care more about settling scores than preserving Republican majorities. Joining us now, Ben Rhodes, former Deputy National Security Advisor, MS Now political and national security analyst, and author of the new book, All We Say, The Battle for American Identity. I'm fascinated by the premise of the book. I'm fascinated by how what we're seeing contrasts with what I see in that book. And you write about the power of great speeches, about why they matter. What does it say about this moment that our politics seem to be driven less by carefully crafted words, but mostly by some meandering musings of Donald Trump's grievances?
Well, Chris, it's an interesting question because reliving the last 250 years through these 15 speeches, I'm tracing the ways in which Americans have stood up at different times and tried to direct the country in some new direction. And Trump is the last speech in the book. And I thought a lot about what made Trump different and where he's actually quite similar. Because sometimes we can feel like the moment we're in is the most extraordinary, when in fact there's a lot of origins for what's happening. So when you look at Trump, there are things that I disagree with that have deep roots in the United States that I found in other periods and times, right? What you just did in your last segment, there has been anti-immigrant feeling and xenophobia in this country in many periods. There has been a kind of paranoid isolationism in different periods. What is different and distinct about Trump is the absolute personalization of the federal government. You know, the speech I do from him is the second inaugural address in which he says, you know, I was saved by God to make America great again. In the entire speech, the word I is the predominant word, not we. And so when you look at what he's doing with the Justice Department, that is actually different. We have not seen that before. There have been presidents that I vigorously disagree with, who I thought acted in immoral or amoral ways. But the idea that a president would take the Justice Department of the United States and turn it into a vehicle for retribution against both his political and personal enemies with no real political purpose, right? It does nothing for the Republican Party or for any ideological interest of Donald Trump's to
the contrary, right, Ben? In some of what we're seeing now, the Republicans say it's actually hurting them.
I'm sure it is. I mean, if you take the totality of what he's doing, you know, building a ballroom, building an arch with taxpayer dollars, talking about putting himself on currency, pursuing retribution against his enemies, be they political or E. Jean Carroll, that's going to undermine the Republican Party because people are going to look at that and say, well, what does that have to do with lowering my gas prices? Or what does it have to do with anything, frankly, other than Donald Trump's preoccupations? And again, that I think it's important to understand history. What is distinct about this time? And that's really what's distinct. I mean, tragically, even what's happening with ICE is not entirely distinct when you look back at our history, at the campaigns of mass deportation in the 1950s or the internment of Japanese in the 1940s. That doesn't mean that some of those things aren't worse than what he's doing with the Justice Department. But it is what is so hard for our system to process with Trump is that there's actually not really a precedent for someone just saying, this is all mine and I can do what I want with it.
And I think also in the last couple of weeks, Ben, we've seen Trump-endorsed candidates, people who have been endorsed by him, win decisively. People, frankly, who often sound like him. They're inflammatory. They're unapologetic. if this is a template that's winning today, and, we'll see what happens in general elections, but what does it mean for the midterms, for the next presidential race? I feel like I've been reporting for multiple cycles about the deterioration of the language and the attacks that are being used in politics. This is a whole different world, though, than what we were talking about pre-Donald Trump.
This is a conversation I think we do need to have, Chris, because look, I'll put it this way, because you can look at it politically. What happens when you have people like, Ken Paxton, who are able to somehow withstand the worst kinds of scandals around corruption and personal conduct, and yet still be rewarded if they, speak the language of Donald Trump. I think we have to consider what the impact is on our children and the broader society. I have 2 daughters, and I think about what has their generation absorbed by having the most powerful people in this country essentially have no floor for their own personal conduct and make a point out of trying to be as pugilistic and offensive as possible and try to demonstrate that there's not really any consequences even for certain kinds of personal behavior. Again, when you go back and you inhabit, as I did in this book, people like FDR and Martin Luther King and even Ronald Reagan, who I didn't agree with about things. But these are people that sought through words in their public presentation to set an example for the broader society. And I think there's something deeply, one of the reasons things feel so disorienting to Americans right now and people are so uneasy is that there's an absence of that kind of storytelling about who we are and who we're supposed to be that has come through speeches in the past. But even more so, there's a kind of performative bad behavior that is actually the norm in the example that is being set. And that's why these things do matter. We can't discount them as just politics or I want to tune that out. It permeates the culture. And that's what I worry about when you see people following in the example of Donald Trump.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many people have stopped me on the street and say, I'm afraid when I get up in the morning to turn on my phone and check my news feed. That's where we are. I had about 10 more questions. We're out of time. Ben Rhodes, the name of the book, All We Say, The Battle for American Identity. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Chris.